Three Israeli civilian men appeared in much poorer physical condition than the previous 18 hostages released during the latest ceasefire, which sparked outrage in Israel. While on Air Force One, U.S. President Donald Trump commented on the state of the hostages, comparing them to the images seen after the Holocaust.
When I see that scene that I saw today with people coming out of helicopters and airplanes that are emaciated, that look like they haven't had a meal in a month, there's no reason for that, and I don't know how much longer we can take it.
Do you think you want to recast?
I don't know how long we can take it. When I watch people that were healthy people a reasonably short number of years ago, and you look at them today, they look like they've aged 25 years. They literally look like the old pictures of Holocaust survivors. The same thing. I mean, the same thing. And I don't know how long we're going to take that.
Israel released 183 prisoners as part of the ceasefire agreement. Citizen spokesperson Adela Cojab joined us from Israel for more on the release.
The three hostages were released after 491 days in captivity, 16 months in captivity, and as they walked on stage being paraded by Hamas terrorists holding machine guns and chanting and yelling while being handed certificates of being held in captivity, you could see that they were visibly frail, a level of frailness that we haven't seen with other hostages. If we saw the women that were released earlier this week or that were released earlier this month, or even in the first hostage exchange, the women seem to be in much better condition. The men, of course, we know are the slower hostages that Hamas will release, and each one looked more emaciated than the next, which means that the other male hostages that are being held are likely held in similar conditions. We've also heard from them after, speaking to their trauma specialists and to initial intakes with the Israeli forces, that they were tortured severely while in captivity. They were being hung by their feet. They were only being allowed to shower once every couple of months after being held for 16 months. And they're conditions that we honestly cannot even imagine, conditions that were inhuman, which, by the way, if you compare that to the way that they were released, it's such an undignified way to return home. I think the Red Cross needs to step in and say that this is not the way that we can treat released civilian hostages. Both Eli Sharabi and Ohad Ben Ami were taken from the Be'eri kibbutz, which is a kibbutz that's right near Gaza. They were taken in the morning, early morning, and they were brought into Gaza where they were held for 16 months. Eli Sharabi came out of captivity, and the first thing he said was that he wanted to be reunited with his wife and his daughters. But unbeknownst to him, they have been killed on October 7th. The trauma that Eli Sharabi will face when he's actually told that his family has been taken away from him will be almost as severe as his captivity. It's also important to know that Be'eri, which was one of the most hard-hit kibbutzim, has been waiting for their members to be returned home, and now two of them will actually be able to return. Or Levy, who is 34, was taken from the Nova Music Festival and was held in captivity for 16 months. To think about the point of view of Or going to a music festival where he was partying for 2-3 days, and then suddenly he spent the next 16 months in captivity is also such a stark difference that's going to be impossible to comprehend. I think that the three victims that were now released, the three hostages that were released, are going to have to reintegrate into society. It's going to be a slow process. The world that they left is very different from the one that they're coming back to.
We also spoke about the reaction from the Israeli public after seeing the hostages released in such poor condition.
The Palestinian prisoners that are being released in exchange for these three civilian hostages are in jail for some of the most heinous crimes against humanity, from planning terror attacks and bombings to first-degree murder. These terrorists are being held not because they were in the wrong place in the wrong time. One of the terrorists who was supposed to be released from prison, Jamal Al-Khor, was in jail for killing Sharon Adiri. And after a social media campaign and outrage from the Israeli public, they ended up not releasing him as part of this deal. The feeling in Israel is twofold. On one hand, we want every single hostage home so they don't bear a single other day in captivity the way that these three did. But on the other hand, the anger and the feeling that the ceasefire is an unfair deal is also brewing. I think that on behalf of the Israeli public, I can say that every single hostage must return home as they should have 16 months ago. It has been way too long for these families to wait for their children to come home and to see fathers, uncles, children, mothers, grandmothers in the states that they've been coming out has really been heartbreaking for the Israeli public and the Jewish public in general.